Howdy, howdy, Chris here, and on today's episode of Garage Noise, I'm going to share with you how to repair cracked or peeling paint on your rear bumper cover. I'm going to walk you through the entire painting process and repair process. Let's dig in and get started. A common thing that happens when you take an impact on your rear bumper cover is the paint may crack or peel. The first step in this repair process is to make sure your bumper cover is clean and free from contaminants. You can wash it with soap and water and then go over it with a wax and grease remover. This is an automotive prep solvent that's going to clean any contaminants off that bumper. This should be done before you start sanding so you're not sanding any contaminants or oils into your paint. The next step is to sand this cracked and damaged paint smooth. I'm going to use an orbital sander with some 320 grit sandpaper. So this bumper's been painted just a couple times. When this cracked, there was a hard edge there. So we want to make that as smooth as possible before we put any filler or any primer over it. So we use a process called feather edging, which gradually smooths out the edge of that paint line. With a couple of layers of paint, it's important because it's thicker than just one layer of paint, and we need to smooth that out so when we prime it, it has a good transition, it's easy to block, it's easy to get flat and straight. I chose 320 grit sandpaper, but if 320 is not sanding out fast enough, you could use 180 grit sandpaper. That's going to sand it a little bit quicker. But remember, you have to remove those 180 grit scratches and get those to 320 grit scratches before you primer. One thing to note is when a flexible part such as a bumper made of plastic takes an impact, it flexes the entire bumper. So you could have some micro cracking around that bumper cover in different areas that are hard to see. So make sure you inspect your part properly and look for any micro cracks. Now, those cracks have to be removed in order to repair it properly, and the way to do that is to sand it down to the, in this case, the plastic, and remove those. The next step is to prepare the surface for primer and paint. We need to primer the areas we repair the paint cracks, and how I like to go about doing that is I prep out the entire bumper for paint and clear coat before I primer. And the reason for that is if I get primer on an area that's unsanded, that's going to cause an issue. So I want to sand the entire bumper with 600 grit sandpaper. If you were wanting to put paint over your entire bumper cover because of imperfections, then you can sand it with 320 grit. But remember, if you sand it with 320 grit, you need to put paint over it. Okay? The 600 preps it out for clear coat so you don't have to put paint over those 600 grit sanded areas. We can blend the color and then clear the entire bumper. Remember, preparation is the most important part of any repair. And it's very important that when you prep out this bumper for paint, you get all the edges very well so you can promote adhesion. I like to use a gray scuff pad that's equivalent to a 600 or 800 grit scratch, or a foam 600 grit pad. And if you have any questions about materials or products, you can check out my storefront. The link is down in the description. It has all the products I use on these repairs. Or you can ask me a question down in the comments below. The next step is to clean, prep, and prime. So we've washed this entire bumper down with some wax and grease remover to remove any dust or contaminants. For added protection to promote adhesion, you can use an adhesion promoter over these repaired areas before you primer. The primer I'm using today is Roberlo ME1. This is a 2K urethane primer. That is a high build primer that sands very easy, and it's going to be perfect for this repair. Darris is using the 3M Performance gun to spray this primer, and what we've done is we've narrowed the fan pattern way down on this 3M gun. We want to be very precise with where we put this primer. I'm putting 2 good coats of primer over these repaired areas. So we'll let the first coat flash off for 10 minutes, and then we put a second coat on. This gives us enough build and material to be able to block this a little bit and make sure it's straight. The next step is to sand or block this primer for paint. So what we're doing is we're taking a small block with some 320 grit sandpaper, and Darris is going to block this in an X pattern to get it perfectly straight. Darris is using a small flexible block so it goes around the contours of this bumper cover. Remember, preparation is the most important part of this repair. The painting is actually really easy to do, so make sure you're taking your time to remove any texture that's in this primer and make sure your bumper cover is smooth. Is this video helpful? If it is, support the channel by liking this video and leave me a comment down below. Now it's time to paint, and I cannot wait to share with you just how easy it is. First thing we need to do is take a tack rag and tack this off, wipe it all down, and remove any dust that's accumulated on this panel. Make sure it's nice and clean. The paint I'm using today is the Acer XL. This paint has very good coverage, even though it's red. So that, in combination with it being a solid color, I am not going to seal this before I paint. I'm just going to go ahead and spray the red on. And the first thing I want to do is to cover the primer areas, get 2 coats on those primered areas and get those covered. I am using the 3M Performance gun with a 1.3 tip. I have the fan pattern set almost wide open, about a quarter turn from wide open. My volume is turned 3 turns out for the volume, and the air pressure I'm using is 20 psi. A good rule is to be about 3 to 5 inches away from the panel, depending how you like to spray. And if you notice here, keep your wrists flexible. So when you make a pass, if you can, run right off the panel. So right here, I'm running right off the panel. I'm not stopping on the panel. I'm not starting on the panel. You can also just turn your wrist a little bit when you start your pass and when you finish your pass. You probably want to put 2 to 3 coats on your primer. So you want to make sure it's not transparent and you can't see that primer through the paint. And typically that's 2 to 3 coats. Now you can check it with a light to make sure before you clear coat. Once I have my primer all covered, I'm going to gradually blend that color out into the old color. So I'm blending the new color out into the old color to get a good transition from the new color to the old. You want to be putting medium coats over this primer. So you put a coat on, you let it flash for 10 minutes, and then you put another coat on. Let it flash for 10 minutes. This gives it enough time to properly start curing and let those solvents release from the paint so you can put another coat on and you're not trapping anything in the first coat. So a general rule is 10 minutes between coats, and that includes paint and clear coat. In between coats of paint, you want to look over your paint, make sure there's no particles of dust or anything of that nature. If there are, then you might want to tack rag it off before you put the next coat on. And this goes for clear coat as well. I do like to tack my panel off before I start the clearing process. Today I'm using the Valspar V Series Euro Clear. This is a high solids clear that mixes 2 to 1. I am going to use the 3M Performance gun to spray this clear. I'm going to leave my settings the same. The only thing I'm going to adjust is I'm going to bump up my air pressure to 24 psi. It works really good and atomizes really well at that air pressure. On your first coat of clear, you want a medium to wet coat of clear. We're not trying to make this absolutely perfectly flat on the first coat. We're going to do a second coat, and that's where we're going to refine the clear coat finish and flatten this out and let it flow. Okay, so I'm going to start clearing on one end of this bumper and then work my way over to the other side. Now, the important thing to remember here is you want to have a consistent distance from this panel and a consistent speed. This is going to help give you a uniform finish on your clear coat. You want to overlap 70% from one pass to the next. So you want to have that wet, where that wet edge is, you want to overlap that 70% on your next pass. And then you continually chase that wet edge and keep it wet the entire time. That's how you're going to get a nice, uniform, consistent finish. Get in the habit of evaluating your clear coat as you're laying it down. And how you do that is you take the light source and you look at the clear coat in the light as you're laying it down and use that light source to help guide you on how your clear is laying down and what adjustments you might need to make. There are a ton of different adjustments you can make as you're spraying your clear coat to get your desired finish. To keep it simple, let's think about air pressure and the volume, okay? So you're spraying at a speed that you're comfortable with, and let's say you get a little bit too much texture. You're seeing too much orange peel as you're laying this clear down. You're looking in the light, you're looking at your light source, and it's just too much texture. What you want to do is you want to bump up that air pressure just a little bit. Don't touch the volume, bump up your air pressure a little bit. That's going to help that clear coat atomize and lay a little flatter. If you bump up your air pressure and you're still getting too much texture or orange peel, then what you can do is dial your volume down just a little bit, bump up your air pressure a little bit more, and what that's going to do is allow less material to come out of the gun, help to atomize that clear coat better so you get a nice glass-like finish. Try not to overcomplicate it. It's really not that complicated. I'm going to tell you right now, air pressure and volume are going to make most of the adjustments that you need. Now, if you have an inconsistency in your technique, that's a different issue, and that's going to show up when you're spraying. You're going to get a dry area in one area, you're going to get orange peel in another, maybe you're going to miss some areas. If that's the case, reevaluate your technique and make sure you're doing everything you need to do to get that glass-like finish. If you want to learn more about how to spray clear like glass, I have a video dedicated to that topic. I'll leave a link at the end. To be the absolute best painter and body tech that you can be, all you have to do is like, subscribe, and check out my growing library of videos that are dedicated to teaching you everything you need to know about paint and body repair. I appreciate each and every one of you. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on Garage Noise.